Hello YouTube, this is Stromnes. Now this has to be one of the most satisfying farms I ever built in survival Minecraft. I'm talking about Stromnes WiSkeTrain with a skeleton farm. I built this in 1.20 survival Minecraft. The farm is relatively easy to build as far as wither skeleton farms go. This farm uses no portals. It uses very limited spawnproofing. The main deviation from Stromnes design is that I tried to make this farm as simple as possible, as fast to build as possible. We have spawnproofed the fortress structures. There's no way around that, unfortunately. But we haven't spawnproofed any of the surroundings. Of course, we have not broken any bedrock above the farm, except for one spot to go down here. We use one double crossing as spawning space, 4 iron golems per spawning platform, for a total of 12, and one minecart line bringing the wither skeletons to the player. However, the farm is still quite efficient. It gives almost 500 wither skulls an hour. It gives about 22,000 bones per hour and about 16,000 coal. Now let's be clear, if you can use portals and you just want a few quick wither skeletons, then ENX04's wither skeleton farm is probably the way to go. There you don't have to do any spawn proofing at all. Now my farm has about 3 times the rates than Ian's farm, but still Ian's farm gives about 140 wither skulls per hour, which is probably enough for a normal survival player. But Ian's farm does use portals, and you can't use portals on every server. For example, this server here uses a world border. Now this is Xero's map. Now for example, if your world border is 8,000 blocks, you just have a 1,000 by 1,000 area where you could find a soul sand valley with a fortress in it to build this farm. And unfortunately on this map I had to go over 4,000 blocks out to find a suitable location for the farm. So I needed a farm that didn't use any portals. And of course, this being a relatively new survival world, I wanted a farm where I don't have to spawn proof for days or even weeks. Let's walk you through the farm. After that, I will talk about which changes I did to Stromnes design and why. And I will also give you a few pointers how to build this farm. For example, how to get the wither roses you need and how to do the spawn proofing. This is the world download where I designed this farm. I found a fortress in the soul sand valley. Then I chose a double crossing. They have the advantage that they are rather large. They are 19 by 19. And 2 of them gives us a 19 by 38 spawning platform. And we can do this in 3 levels. But the spawning sphere is perfectly inside the soul sand valley. And the reason is that the soul sand valley has very different spawning rules from all other biomes. The bottom line is that you get very few mobs in the soul sand valley. If you want to know more details, I'll link a video by Gnembon who explains it very well. But even if a small part of a different biome is in your spawning sphere, then you will get a ton of mobs there that will take up all of the mob cap and your farm will produce very few drops. Wither skeletons will spawn here. They will fall down these drop chutes. They will land on honey so they don't take a lot of fall damage. And they are picked up by minecarts. You can also use hay bales. The important thing is that the wither skeletons don't get too much fall damage. At the end of the day, pretty much every minecart is filled. So this double crossing, without a lot of spawn proofing, allows us to fully utilize one of these minecart lines. And here's the killing chamber. And this is a bit different from Stromnes version. The mobs are unloaded to one spot here, which is the only spot where the activator rail can drop the mob. And then they are dropped down into the killing chamber by a shifting floor design. Now this shifting floor design is synchronized to the minecarts because the problem is that if a mob is unloaded at the moment where the floor is shifted, this spot will not be a legal unloading spot and the mob will probably end up here on the rail. So we have to make sure that the floor only shifts if no mob is unloaded. So we use a detector rail here to give us a pulse that is timed in the right way. The mobs drop down onto a cobweb, which is a nice trick I saw in Tangotech's gold farm on Hermitcraft. The player of course stands here, hits an armor stand. The trapdoors ensure a safe distance from the mobs. You will not collect all of the XP, but enough XP to keep the sword mended. The player has a looting and sweeping edge sword with mending. The player stands on the pressure plate that kind of activates the whole farm, sends the minecarts. The cobweb gives the player time to kill the wither skeletons. The items will land in the cobweb, will be grouped to stacks and fall down directly into a storage system, so we don't need any minecart yeeting. However, we also want a bit of protection. For example, if an armor stand breaks, which can happen if you play on a server and you have a lag spike, then the wither skeletons will fall through the cobweb and be killed by a powder snow block that is below that. So if anything goes wrong, the player won't have to deal with 24 angry wither skeletons. I couldn't find a way to unload the mobs using an activator rail directly onto a cobweb, so I'm not very good with minecarts. If you know a way, please let me know. So here we get stacked items and we just have to collect this to a storage system. The world download contains two sorting systems. One is kind of a quick and dirty, maybe temporary solution. So if you don't have time to build up a full sorting system but you want to run the farm for a bit. Here we have no shifting floors. We drop the mobs on a soul sand. The player will kill them directly. We just have an item filter below the soul sand that picks up the wither skulls. Of course, you probably want to collect at least the coal and maybe also the bones from the skeletons. So this is pretty much the actual sorting system that I use in my farm. Now the advantage of cobwebs is that they group items to stack, but this is also a disadvantage because actually you can get quite a lot of items at one time. So therefore I didn't use the normal impulse sorters, but I use a version where we can use only one item of each type. These are also overflow protected and each of the sorters can pick up 63 items. So even if we get a large group of items, the sorters can handle them. Then they go into shulker box loaders. I have one shulker box loader each for the wither skulls, for the bones and for the coal. The design of the shulker box loader is by Borkon. So what are the changes to Stromnes design? On one side we didn't spawn proof the surroundings, so we could get, for example, skeleton spawns on these blocks or on all the blocks here that we haven't spawn proofed, and these skeletons could see the golems. So we need to protect them at least in the direction where a skeleton could be, and this clearly depends a bit on your surrounding, where you build the farm. We don't use pack spawning optimization. These borders here at the outside, this double crossing will supply enough skeletons to fill all of the minecarts. So this would only make sense if we had a second line and could move more skeletons. I think the pickup chamber is pretty much the same. The kill chamber is different. Overall, the main difference is that I tried to make this farm as simple as possible, as fast to build as possible, and yet the rates are good enough so that a few hours in this farm will give you plenty of wither skulls for the rest of the season, and probably enough coal to last you a long time. But the beauty of this farm is that it's very forgiving. Even if we don't do a perfect job spawn proofing, the farm will pretty much give us a wither skeleton with each minecart. We dispense them at hopper speed, that means every 8 game ticks, or 2.5 minecarts per second. If we consider the chance to get a wither skull, this would give us a maximum of 495 wither skulls per hour. And this farm is up there, about 480, 485. We clearly use up the capacity of one minecart line. One double crossing is just enough to provide enough wither skeletons to fill all these minecarts. Even if you lose a few. For example, it might happen that a wither skeleton stands here and just tries to hit the golem. On a server it also happens very occasionally that the golem kills a wither skeleton, because for some reason the server calculations are different. But in the end it doesn't really matter. We get enough mobs to get close per 500 skulls per hour. The elegance of this farm is of course that you don't have to choose your spot in the vicinity of the double crossing. This AFK spot could be close to 120 blocks away from the spawning platforms. It doesn't matter, because mobs in minecarts don't count against the mob cap. So as soon as they are arriving here, it doesn't really matter how long they take to get to the player. The moment they are picked up, they don't count against the mob cap anymore. Now here we have a few mobs counting against the mob cap, but they are still killed reasonably fast enough. Of course we could make this faster, but it wouldn't really increase the rates unless we would use a second or third or fourth hopper line. And of course, if you really want, you later have the option to extend this farm, to do more spawn proofing, to build a faster killing chamber, to build a second, third and fourth minecart line. So if you'd like to see a tutorial for this farm, let me know. But I will give you the cliff notes how to build this farm. Now first, you will have to find a suitable biome. And again, it has to be a soul sand valley. Otherwise, you will have to spawn-proof everything around the farm. Depending on the surroundings, maybe 60,000 blocks, maybe 70,000. This will take maybe 10 to 20 hours, depending on how fast you are. We have to find the soul sand valley. Now, if you know the seed, then you can use a tool like Chunk Base to basically show you the interesting biomes and find a fortress in there. And the thing is, you need a spot where the complete spawning sphere, that means 128 blocks in all directions, will be in the soul sand valley. So all these won't work here. Maybe this one. This looks a bit close. But unlike other builds, you don't need a crossing that has such a spot where 128 blocks in all directions is soul sand valley, because this can be really hard to find, especially if you don't know the seed. But what you need is a soul sand valley that is just large enough and a nether fortress that looks as if it's in there. So this might be a good candidate. Let's have a look at that. If you don't know the seed, you will need a tool like Xero's World Map, and I will use a few client-side mods, and I strongly recommend you use the same. Xero's Map is one of them. The other are Minihut and Twickaroo, because they make the process so much easier. And they are client-side mods. That means you can run them on your computer with any vanilla server. Here we have soul sand valley all around. This looks as it could fit. Here we also have a fortress. So we use the FreeCam feature from Twickaroo to have a look at the fortress and check out candidates for suitable AFK spots. So let's just set any AFK spot here, and we use Minihut to generate a spawning sphere around the AFK spot that we choose. And now you need to go into the configuration and show the biome border. So this has to be true. Overlay biome border. And then you will see the spawning sphere here. So you just go around the sphere and look if it intersects with any biome or other structures, maybe another fortress or a bastion. But this already looks pretty good. This seems to be the only spot. So we just look at the minimap and see this is to the west. So we need to move the sphere just a bit to the east, maybe 10 blocks, maybe 15. So let's do that. And now the sphere no longer intersects with the biome. And we just go around once more. Repeat this process. You might have to do it a couple of times. So yeah, we have found an AFK spot, which has these coordinates. So this is the AFK spot that we picked. And now we need to find a double crossing. And this one actually works. If you play single player, you can also use the fortress renderer, which is the structure main toggle. These inner red structures are the areas where mobs can spawn on all blocks and not just on nether bricks. Double crossings have the largest bounding box, so they are the easiest to use. Now the spawning area has to be 24 blocks away from the AFK spot, otherwise no mobs will spawn there. And it makes sense to move it 8 blocks further out, so mobs can despawn if anything goes wrong. Depending on the space you have, you can move the AFK spot just to the top or below the farm. Both is possible with this minecart based farm. Here in this case I could move the AFK spot about 20 blocks to the north, so it's roughly the same level as the spawning platforms. The next thing I did was to break bedrock to go down here, because this is really far away from my home and I wanted to travel over the nether roof. So we have a location for the farm. We have access to the area and a fast way to travel there, and we can start building. But I did another step of preparation, and this was to create a mob switch, which allowed me to spawn-proof the fortress almost as if it were in creative mode. And for that I reused something that I already had, and this is the warden protection. So let's have a look at that. So this is the ancient city protection that Ilmango described. Here we have a clock that is activated once exactly every 10 seconds. Here we have a few arrows in, and every 10 seconds these arrows are pushed up using a piston. This will spawn a warden, but the warden has the only place to spawn in the portal, and it goes directly to the roof. And we use a chunk loader, and for security reason I use a different portal for the chunk loader. So I built the chunk loader up in the sky. Now the design of this chunk loader is by Dark, so let's turn it on. We have just a minecart that is sent back and forth. And you can see new wardens coming in. If you have the mob caps logging enabled, you can see we are already above the limit, so that's cool. We have 80 mobs, that's fine. Usually for the warden protection I just kill them using powder snow. Here I placed a few vines, but I also have dispensers, and these dispensers will dispense powder snow if I activate them. So once I'm done with the chunk loading, I have a way to kill the wardens safely. Let's turn the chunk loader off, because we have enough mobs. And this was all built because I wanted to explore deep docks. And all I needed to do for the mob switch was to add this noise machine here that will keep the wardens from despawning because they are angry at the noise. I added the vines so that they don't take damage. I made sure that I have a way to kill them safely because I can dispense powder snow in here. And I added the second chunk loader. And this chunk loader will keep these wardens in the lazy chunks when I'm gone. So the wardens are exactly 2 chunks away from the chunk loader. They are loaded but not processed, so they don't even cost any CPU time. Of course you can be creative with mob switches. If, for example, you have a shulker farm, this one will work perfectly well. And now I can explore this fortress just as in creative mode. No mobs will spawn, except for blaze spawners that might still work. In Bastion you get some mobs that are persistent, like the piglin brutes, so these would still be there. Now that your mob switch is running, you have all the time in the world to spawn-proof the area using buttons or slabs. Buttons are of course easier to place. With slabs you always have the risk to place 2 slabs on top of each other. But of course if you have in an open area where you might have to confront ghasts, then slabs are better because stone slabs will not be blasted by ghasts. So let's construct the spawning platforms. Here we have a nice double crossing, but we have to get rid of the nether bricks and we can't insta-mine them even with a beacon. And in this case we also have quite a lot of netherrack. So let's first mark out the center of each crossing with a block that can't be blasted. And this is just for you. From the center you go 9 blocks out to each side, and this will be the size of our spawning platform. But you don't really need to mark them with obsidian. And if you have a stack or 2 of TNT handy, then you can create the space that you need in almost no time. And of course we still have the obsidian to outline the fortress structures, and we may have to remove a few more blocks, but otherwise you're good to go. And a short while later you should have built the spawning platforms and the chambers for the golems. It's important that you have the right height. Here I recreated the blocks marking our crossing. Again, you need only 1 obsidian in the center. And the highest platform will be exactly 2 blocks over the obsidian, the middle platform 2 blocks below, and then another platform 4 blocks lower. Then you can build the killing chamber and the rails. Of course, the rail layout will depend a bit on where you build your AFK spot. Make sure to use only powered rails, no normal rails. So this setup allows you to send the minecarts around the corner, because we need to send minecarts every 8 game ticks. If minecarts collide, we will have to clean up a bit. So what happens if you don't have wither roses yet? If you have spawn-proofed the fortress without a mob switch, you probably have killed enough wither skeletons for a beacon, and you can use ENXO4's instant wither rose farm to get enough roses. However, if you don't have that yet, you can basically build the platforms just as you would without the wither roses. And I assume you have a good source of iron, because we will probably need to repair or respawn a few iron golems. You see a lot of magma cubes, blazes, piglins spawning, and it's not a good idea to start the minecarts, because eventually you will get a few small magma cubes in there and they will throw off everything. But what you can do is make a little walkway that I have prepared here. So this is where the wither skeletons will fall down, and a few wither skeletons will spawn. So they will try to get to the iron golem, they will fall down here. Now this walkway doesn't have to be of glass, of course, it's just so that you can see what's going on. And then we will go in here in survival. And the walkway needs to be far enough away so that you get a few spawns here. And then you can just walk here, and if there are no wither skeletons, keep walking. But if there are wither skeletons, just open the trapdoors, kill them. And you see there we got a skull. Of course I have a looting sword. Make sure all the wither skeletons are dead. Within 24 blocks no new mobs will spawn. So you can go in here and pick up the wither skulls. And then you just rinse and repeat until you have 3. It shouldn't take too long. And again, ENXO4's Wither Rose farm is set up in a couple of minutes. All you need is 3 skulls for 1 wither. And once you have the wither roses, you can plant them. Of course, you may need to establish the mob switch once again, because you will see a lot of blazes. Or if you don't have a mob switch, perhaps you will start out with a smaller area, just a 19 by 19 area, 1 crossing, and get the wither skulls in the way I described. After that, you just have to kill the mobs on the platform once, and then all of the platform will be in a 24 block radius around you. So once you are on the platform and start planting wither roses, no other mobs will spawn on this platform, so you won't be disturbed. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you want to see more content like this, and leave a comment if you want to see a block by block tutorial for the farm. I realize this is more complicated than most of the other farms that I did, but I hope it was worth it, and beacons are always a good thing to have. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye bye!